C.S. Lewis once said, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for him to wait." Have you ever found yourself in that frustrating space where it seems like the heavens are silent and you're left wondering if your prayers have even been heard? Waiting, though uncomfortable, is not a sign of abandonment, but rather a crucible for growth. Just as every child must learn that not yet is not the same as no, we too must understand that God's delays are often his way of preparing us for what's to come. You might be in God's waiting room, feeling the sting of uncertainty as you wait for a door to open, for healing, or for answers. But remember, this season of waiting is not without purpose. God is at work, even in the silence, refining your character and deepening your faith. So, stay with us as we delve deeper into understanding God's timing and why it's crucial to trust in his plan. If this resonates with you, please like this message and share your thoughts in the comments below before we move on to the next part of our journey together. Can I get a "God is great" from you? In our world, waiting is often seen as a burden, an obstacle that stands between us and our desires. We live in an era of immediacy where every second counts, and technology has trained us to expect instant results. Our culture glorifies speed and efficiency, teaching us that time is a commodity too valuable to be squandered. We become uneasy when faced with delays, equating waiting with inactivity and inactivity with failure. It's almost as if waiting signals that something is amiss, that the universe has veered off course. This impatience isn't just a modern inconvenience, it's a reflection of a deeper struggle within us, a struggle against the discomfort of uncertainty, the fear that our plans may unravel if they're not realized immediately. But what if this struggle isn't just about the external world? What if it's a reflection of our inner state? C.S. Lewis, a profound Christian thinker, once said, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for him to wait." This insight invites us to reconsider our aversion to waiting. Could it be that our impatience reveals our lack of trust in God's timing? When we're forced to wait, do we allow our minds to spiral into worry and doubt? Or do we seize the opportunity to deepen our faith, trusting that God's plan is unfolding exactly as it should? Lewis understood that waiting is not a passive state, but a profound exercise in trust and faith. In a society that idolizes immediate gratification, how do we reconcile this with a faith that often requires us to wait in uncertainty? The truth is, waiting is woven into the fabric of our spiritual journey. It's in the waiting that we're stretched, that our faith is tested, and that we learn to lean not on our own understanding, but on God's infinite wisdom. As we wait, we're called to wrestle with our impatience, to ask ourselves, why am I so uneasy? What is it about this waiting that stirs up such anxiety within me? It's here, in these moments of reflection, that we can begin to see waiting not as a curse, but as a gift that shapes our character and deepens our reliance on God. So, rather than viewing waiting as time wasted, could it be that God is inviting us into a deeper relationship with him? Could the very act of waiting be an opportunity to surrender our timelines and expectations to his perfect will? Waiting, then, becomes an act of faith, a declaration that we trust God's timing more than our own. It's in the waiting that we find the space to listen, to grow, and to align our hearts with God's purposes. So, the next time you find yourself in a season of waiting, remember Lewis's words and ask yourself, what is God teaching me in this moment of pause? How can this waiting refine me and draw me closer to him? In the end, waiting is not a detour from the path, it is the path, leading us ever closer to the heart of God. C.S. Lewis, a profound thinker and devoted Christian, once reflected on the challenge of waiting, especially when the outcome remains uncertain. In his works, Lewis often grappled with the tension between faith and doubt, particularly in the face of life's uncertainties. He recognized that waiting, whether for God's plan to unfold or for life's trials to resolve, can be a deeply unsettling experience. Lewis wrote, "It is so hard to wait when you don't know how things are going to turn out." This simple yet profound statement touches on the core of human anxiety, the fear of the unknown. How often do we find ourselves in moments of waiting, where the silence of heaven feels like an unbearable weight? Do we not question, in those moments, whether God truly has a plan for us? Lewis understood that waiting without clarity can lead to doubt, a creeping shadow that whispers, "What if this doubt," as Lewis knew well, can gnaw at the very roots of our faith? He described it as a subtle yet powerful force, capable of shaking the foundations of even the most steadfast believer. "I wonder if God is going to do this," we might think. "I wonder if it's really going to be all right." These questions are not merely rhetorical, they strike at the heart of our trust in God's providence. How many times have you found yourself teetering on the edge of doubt, wondering if your prayers have been heard, or if the silence means something has gone wrong? Lewis would ask, is your faith anchored in God's character or in the outcomes you desire? The real danger, however, lies not just in the doubt itself, but in the temptation to take matters into our own hands. Lewis warned that when we wait too long, we might be tempted to just handle it ourselves. This is the moment when faith wavers and self-reliance takes over a perilous path that can lead us away from God's will. Lewis would argue that this temptation is a test of our true trust in God. Can we resist the urge to control the situation, to force an outcome, when God's timing feels unbearably slow? In The Problem of Pain, Lewis writes about the struggle to surrender our will to God, especially when His plans seem hidden from us. He asks, can we trust Him even when we cannot trace Him? In these moments of waiting, Lewis encourages us to reflect on the purpose behind the delay. Perhaps the waiting is not just a test of patience, but a refining fire for our faith. As Lewis would suggest, could it be that in the waiting, God is doing a deeper work in our hearts, teaching us to trust Him more fully, to lean not on our own understanding, but on His infinite wisdom? This period of uncertainty might be God's way of drawing us closer, inviting us to rest in the assurance that His ways, though mysterious, are always for our good. Lewis reminds us that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to trust God despite it. So, the next time you find yourself in the throes of waiting, ask yourself, can I trust God with the unknown and resist the urge to take control, believing that His plan, though unseen, is unfolding perfectly? C.S. Lewis, in his profound reflections, often touched on the deep struggles we face when waiting on God. He once said, "God, it's taking too long." This sentiment resonates with many of us who find ourselves in seasons of waiting, where the passage of time feels unbearable, and the silence from heaven almost deafening. But have you ever considered why God makes us wait? Is it possible that this delay is not a denial but a divine orchestration for something far greater than we can comprehend? In Mere Christianity, Lewis elaborates on the idea that our human impatience often leads us to take matters into our own hands. We think we know best, but Lewis warns us that when we step outside of God's timing, we step into a world of chaos and unintended consequences. When you are not practicing obedience, Lewis writes, you are practicing disobedience. This disobedience, born out of impatience, can lead to disastrous outcomes. Have you ever found yourself at the crossroads of faith and frustration, ready to abandon God's plan because it seems like it's taking too long? Imagine a story where a person, after waiting for what feels like an eternity, decides to act independently, only to find that their hastily made decisions lead to even greater heartache and turmoil. This narrative is not far from our reality, is it? How many times have we, in our impatience, tried to force a solution, only to realize later that if we had just waited a little longer, God's perfect plan would have unfolded? Lewis's writings encourage us to reflect deeply on our impulses and desires. He challenges us to trust in God's timing, even when it feels like everything is against us. Are you on the verge of taking control of a situation that seems hopeless? Have you been waiting so long that you feel God has forgotten you? Lewis reminds us that God's delays are not God's denials. What if the very thing you're rushing to fix on your own is the thing God is using to build your faith, to refine your character, and to prepare you for a blessing far beyond your current understanding? In these moments of waiting, it is essential to remember that God is not bound by our clocks. As Lewis wisely put it, the great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own or real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life, the life God is sending one day by day? Could it be that this waiting period is not an interruption, but the very life God is calling you to live in faith and trust? Before you decide to take matters into your own hands, pause and ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me in this season of waiting? What growth, what revelation, what deeper understanding of His love might I miss out on if I move ahead of His timing? Remember, God's timing is perfect, and His plans are for your good. Trust in His process, even when it feels like He's taking too long. The answer to your prayers may be just around the corner, and in waiting, you are preparing your heart to receive it fully. So I came by to ask you a question today. I want you to answer this: how long does God get before you fire Him? How much time before you give God His pink slip? How much time does God get before you terminate Him for not delivering on the contractual measurable objectives that you all agreed upon when you contracted this thing called salvation? You would pray, you would come to church, you would tithe, and God would answer your prayers. And now here you are being religious, faithful, and holy, and God is not doing what you ask God to do. So how long do you give God before you walk away from God? When you're waiting, God is working. You've got to learn to give God time to finish His work while you wait. In your waiting, God is not sitting idly by on the sideline of heaven, just letting time roll by. We serve a God who, while we're waiting on Him, is working on it. Why does God delay? Why does God delay things when clearly He could answer every prayer instantly? Well, if you had every prayer answered, you'd be a selfish little brat, because you'd treat God like a vending machine. God, I need this, pull the trigger, boom, I got it instantly. And God sometimes has to work on you before He works on the solution. When you have asked God for something and it hasn't come yet, and you're in that delay period where you haven't seen the answer to your prayer, what do? Remember, there's a natural delay between planting and harvesting. When I have a garden and I plant seeds, I don't go out the next day expecting to see full-grown tomatoes. When I plant carrot seeds, I don't expect to go out the next day and see carrots. There's always a delay between planting and harvesting. There's always a delay between sowing and reaping. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes 3, there is a time for everything, and there is a season for every activity under heaven. There is a time to plant, and there is a time to harvest. There is a time to scatter, and there is a time to gather. This is simply talking about seasons. You always get the results of what you plant in life in another season, not in the same season. You don't plant and harvest in the same season. Many of you have planted seeds in daring faith, financial seeds, seeds of service, seeds of sacrifice. You're not going to have the harvest immediately. You just need to understand that it comes, but it comes in another season. Write this down: I reap in a different season than I sow. And during that season of waiting, you wait quietly, you wait expectantly, you wait patiently in faith. I remember that there's a natural delay between planting and harvest. So when I put in a request, it's not going to be instantly fulfilled. There is always a delay. A delay is not a denial. You know, everybody waits. Nobody just has a dream, or a vision, or a plan, or a desire, or a hope, and they just get it immediately. Everybody waits. And I know we're in a hurry, and God's not. But being frustrated about how long you have to wait will not get God to hurry. God gives us dreams and visions, or I should say hope. He gives us hope for change. We want to change. We want to see our loved ones change. We want to see the world change. We want our finances to change. There's always something that we want to change. And God is in the business of changing things, but He never tells us when. And it's frustrating, of course. When you have something real big in your heart, it seems to you like it should happen right away at least. That's the way it seems to me. And it rarely ever does happen right away. Because, to be honest, whatever it is we're wanting God to do in our life, usually we have to go through some kind of a preparation period in order for that to happen. And we don't get to skip over those steps. Waiting doesn't have to be a time of misery if we trust God that He will do things not on our timing, but in His timing and at the right time. And might I add, Just because you feel like you're ready in no way means that you are ready. Trust that God is good, that He knows what He's doing, and that He will do the best thing for you at the right time. When you have an idea and you ask God to do something in your life, God usually has a bigger idea and usually has a better idea, and He's going to have to prepare you to get you ready for a bigger and better answer to your prayer. And He usually has to take some time getting you ready, preparing you. And the first thing God wants to do before He answers your prayer for a job, for a mate, for a child to get married, whatever your prayer request is that first. He wants to get you ready because God's more interested in changing your character than He is in answering your prayer, because your character is what you're going to take to heaven. And here's what the Bible says. In 1 Peter 1, there's wonderful joy ahead. That's the inevitable answers to our prayers. Even though it is necessary for you to endure many trials for a while, and this includes the delays. These troubles test your faith. The troubles you're going through right now, this is a test. They test your faith so that it is strong and pure. Just as fire tests and purifies gold, your faith is far more precious to God than mere gold. Some of you are going through the fire right now. Keep going. Waiting is not just a test of time, but a profound test of the soul. When you find yourself praying fervently for something and the answer seems delayed, it's easy to feel lost in the in-between, in that season of waiting that stretches between the planting of hope and the reaping of the harvest. But this waiting, this sacred pause, is more than just a delay. It's a crucible in which your character, trust, faith, and endurance are refined and strengthened. C.S. Lewis once said, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless He sees that it is good for them to wait." This perspective challenges us to consider, what if the waiting is a gift, a time for us to grow, to deepen our reliance on God? What if this period is designed not to frustrate us, but to prepare us for something far greater than we can imagine? Waiting on God requires an incredible amount of strength, a strength that is not of our own making, but one that is forged in the fires of trust and surrender. It demands a faith that remains unshaken, even when everything around us seems uncertain. Lewis also reminds us that faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted. In spite of your changing moods, how often do we find our faith tested by the whims of our emotions, especially when we're waiting? In these moments, do we cling to the promises of God, or do we allow doubt to creep in? The challenge of waiting lies in its demand for complete surrender to God's will, a surrender that requires us to lay down our need for control and to trust fully in His timing. It's easy to act, to do something, to feel productive. But to wait? That is the real test of faith, for it strips us of our illusions of control and asks us to believe that God's timing is perfect. Even when we cannot see it, we must lay before Him what is in us, not what ought to be in us. Lewis wisely advises, urging us to come to God with our real feelings and fears, not the idealized versions we think we should present. What if, in this waiting, God is doing something far beyond what we can comprehend? What if the very act of waiting is preparing us for a blessing that we are not yet ready to receive? The waiting period can be seen as a divine classroom where we learn patience, humility, and deep trust in God's plan. As Lewis pointedly asks, what do people mean when they say, "I am not afraid of God because I know He is good"? Have they never been to a dentist? In the same way, waiting on God can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is always for our ultimate good. So, as you wait, take heart. Trust that God is at work in the waiting, shaping you, preparing you, and aligning circumstances for your good. Remember that he who is God and everything else has no more than he who is God only, as Lewis so beautifully puts it. The waiting may be hard, but the reward for those who trust in God and wait on Him is beyond anything we could ever imagine. God's plans, though sometimes hidden in the waiting, are always for our ultimate good. Can you trust Him enough to wait? So why does God make us wait? Well, it's a tough question, but it's an easy answer. You might not like the answer until I explain it, but sometimes He makes you wait because He's God. And here's what I mean by that: He knows more than you know. He is all-knowing. But here's the good part. Not only is he all-knowing, he's all-loving. So his decision to make you wait is because he loves you. He's doing it for your good. He's doing it for your good. He's doing it because he loves you, and he's also making you wait to build your faith. See, I want you to catch this. When we say God's building your faith, we say that all the time. We say things like, God's building my faith, he's building my faith. Let me say it a different way. He's building your relationship with him so that when the promise comes, you have enough faith in him, you can handle the promise. You won't fail because of the promise. And let's just say it's a business thing where God's going to bless you financially one day. But if he gives you the financial blessing before you're mature enough to handle it, it will ruin you. He knows that. So he's making you wait. So that's one reason God waits. The second reason is because even though he doesn't own a watch, his timing is always perfect. God knows he's got it planned out. He's got your steps planned. He's got every day of your life already planned for perfection. For you, it's perfection. God already knows what he's going to do in your life next month, next year, and next decade. And his plan for you is good. You need to trust him, and you need to relax. And when you're in the waiting room, you need to just say, okay, he's not early, he's not late, he's always on time because God's timing is perfect. He's not too late. I am so glad that in the darker days of my life, I did not give up on God. But I'm even more glad that he didn't give up on me. He knew what he was going to do in my life, and I didn't, and I had no idea. And I want to dare to wait on you and trust that your timing is perfect. What do you do while you wait? What do I do when God's taking too long? What do I do while I'm in the holding period? What do I do when this divine delay seems to be indefinite? What do you do while you wait? While I'm waiting and God is working, I'll keep worshiping. That in my waiting, I'll still worship him. In my waiting, I'll still give him thanks. In my waiting, I'll still pray and call on his name. Because in my waiting, I realize he's still worthy. He still deserves my praise. He still merits my heart's worship. He still calls and compels me to be faithful unto him. While he's working things out for me, he wants me to stay on my knees. He wants me to be in church. He wants me to serve. He wants me to love my neighbor. He wants me to tithe, that I will be faithful with God while I'm waiting. Because while I'm waiting, he's working, and I'll keep worshiping. Wait for the Lord to work all things together for your good. Wait for the Lord to show up in a situation and turn it around. Wait for the Lord to work all things together in your favor. Wait for it. God has not forgotten you. Waiting is one of life's most challenging tests, and it's one that we often resist with every fiber of our being. Why? Because waiting strips us of the illusion that we are in control. When we are forced to wait, whether it's for an answer to a prayer, a resolution to a problem, or the fulfillment of a dream, we are confronted with our powerlessness. The very act of waiting feels like we are wasting time, as though we are accomplishing nothing while the world moves on without us. This sense of inactivity can make us feel insignificant, leading to the nagging thought that perhaps God has forgotten us altogether. Have you ever felt like this? Like you've been left alone in the waiting room of life, wondering if God has moved on to someone else's case? God has not forgotten you. The prophet Isaiah offers us a powerful reminder in saying, "They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength," Isaiah 40 verse 31. This scripture invites us to see waiting not as a punishment, but as a divine tool for transformation. C.S. Lewis, a man whose writings have touched the hearts of millions, deeply understood the spiritual significance of waiting. He once remarked, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for him to wait." In his own periods of waiting, Lewis recognized that these were not empty moments but seasons ripe with the potential for spiritual growth. Consider the many figures in the Bible who were shaped in the waiting: Abraham, who waited for the promised son; Joseph, who waited in prison; David, who waited to become king. Each of these stories teaches us that waiting is not passive, it is an active process of trust and refinement. As Lewis would suggest, the wait itself is a journey, an invitation to draw closer to God, to learn patience, and to surrender our need for control. It's in the waiting that our character is molded, our faith is deepened, and our relationship with God is strengthened. Ben Patterson, in his insightful book on waiting, observes that very often what happens to me while I'm waiting is more important than what I'm waiting for. This aligns with Lewis's belief that the experiences we undergo in the waiting period are often the very things that equip us for what lies ahead. So, when you find yourself in a season of waiting, consider it an invitation from God to relinquish control, to engage in spiritual discipline, and to trust in His timing. Remember, as C.S. Lewis reminds us, that these moments are not in vain, they are divinely orchestrated to bring about a deeper transformation within us.